Medal of Honor. While this is a game series that doesn't get a ton of attention nowadays, those three words alone may invoke such nostalgia in you, bringing you all the way back to your infancy of gaming. In fact, this game series has been around longer since many of us were even born. Reaching back to your earliest memories of FPS gaming, it's very likely that Medal of Honor has a cornerstone in that lineup of games that really made your experience what it is. For myself, Medal of Honor represents a certain time capsule of my life, a chunk in my time where life was a lot more simple. I had an uncle that I would visit often who has since passed away, but every time I would go visit him, he had Medal of Honor games, and I would be allowed to play them for a couple of hours, and I absolutely adored every moment of it. But then I got to thinking, what was it that made these games so good? Why is the Medal of Honor series beloved by so many people, even though it may not be the most mainstream game on the market nowadays? There was a reason it's so memorable. So today we're going to be exploring that exact question. What made Medal of Honor games so good? Now, it's important to remember that Medal of Honor has been around for a long time, releasing tons of different titles, which are all generally centered around the World War II era, which we'll be shifting our focus to. This series became iconic for being the very best World War II era shooter that was around. Each game came with a fully fledged, developed campaign mode with a well-crafted story and easy to understand mechanics in its gameplay. Before the majority of games adopted a health regeneration system in their campaign, Medal of Honor did it differently with health drops as well as ammo drops that you would need to keep track of in order to keep all of your resources in check. This effectively made the game a bit more tactical on how you would approach situations based on how much health and ammo you have and where the next drops are going to be located. The quality and the depth of the gunplay within each game in the series had its own unique attributes, and while they may feel silly and dated by today's standards, if you've played any realistic shooter comparatively released in the year 2020, Medal of Honor's gunplay is bound to feel a little bit dated, but you have to look at this in a bubble for the time that it came out. Many of these games coming in around the early 2000s era, these were absolutely revolutionary at the time. The animations complete with the sound design made for a really realistic feeling war zone. Much of the magic encapsulated within Medal of Honor games, I think, is down to its core objectives. Any single player games now, in order to get a race to the top and be the most bombastic you've ever seen, will take you on many pointless side quests and can get so convoluted and twisted that you almost forget the reason you went on that quest anyways. Medal of Honor takes the exact opposite approach. For the most part, many of the objectives are incredibly simplistic. It's go blow up this thing or, take out these officers. They're very easy to understand, but I think a lot of the charm is in its simplicity. And while you would think that may end up creating a boring or dull gameplay experience, it actually enhanced it. The way Medal of Honor was designed is they essentially created a big battlefield with objectives that you need to complete, but they gave you the option to really do it in any way you want to. It's not as streamlined as some modern FPS games we've seen. To some degree, it is still on the rails, right? It is guiding you along the path that it wants you to complete, but you have tons of options of how to go about it. The core design philosophy behind many of the levels in Medal of Honor was just having this sandbox element, but giving you as many toys and resources to take on how the level you want to. This means that many of the missions are going to have such replayability that you can go back even today and enjoy these, play them in a different manner you've never done before. Each Medal of Honor title is also able to capture this unfleeting sense of immersion, and I think a lot of the reason is not because of its graphics, which again, by today's standards, are just subpar at best, but at the time was light years ahead of anything competing with it. The range of different locations you could find yourself in Medal of Honor games ranged from the iconic Normandy beach to even small, relatable towns. So none of us were around to witness the World War II era firsthand. All we can do is get recollections and recounts of people who did experience it, and I think Medal of Honor does a good job of emulating that as much as possible. Even having just a surface level knowledge on the history and the brutality of war, the Medal of Honor series does not shy away from that subject in the slightest. Being able to tell the story from many different perspectives of the war gave you a very comprehensive view on what was going on and helped you really get a grasp on what you're playing. Generally speaking, Medal of Honor never really had incredibly over-the-top cinematic scenes, and it wasn't as in-your-face as many World War II shooters have been nowadays. The stories that were told and the way they were conveyed to the player were very concise, clear-cut, and simple. And keep in mind, being simple is not a disadvantage to Medal of Honor. Something can be very simple yet effective. The game would give you a series of objectives and tasks that need to be completed within the sandbox and would also reward you along the way. Upon upon completing an objective, sometimes you would lock into attachment for your gun or something, a piece of equipment you've never seen before that would aid you in taking on the next challenge. It didn't rely on external rewards and doing like obscure, nonsensical challenges to unlock things you don't really care about. The reward was playing the game itself and then getting rewarded for playing the game even more. It was a perfect positive feedback loop. Something that I also think was crucial to Medal of Honor's success is that it deviates from the standard path in most FPS games like this, where the game makes you feel just all the time like an absolute god. You are the most powerful entity on the battlefield, and while that technically is true in Medal of Honor, you feel just as vulnerable as the soldier next to you. The game does a great job at making sure you don't feel like the most powerful thing in the world. You're not invincible in this game, and it makes it a lot more immersive in that sense. Of course, in reality, you are going to be more powerful than most of the enemies you're facing, and they're meant for you to get through them, but you feel just like a regular soldier, not a walking god like you do in something like Call of Duty, where there's essentially no stakes to making a mistake or missing a shot. When the game gives you all of the tools and resources you need to be the most powerful thing walking around the battlefield, yeah, sure, that can be fun for a little while, but it ultimately ends up meaning that the game is weightless. And that harkens back to the idea we talked about earlier with the sense of immersion, and I think that's fundamentally why Medal of Honor games tend to feel a little bit more relatable and realistic than other FPS games in the same era that you may have played. I think when it comes down to it, many of the games that are successful are good at being themselves and they're not trying to emulate anything else. For example, Medal of Honor was really the first of its kind, and I think in that case, they were truly the tip of the spear when it came to designing a World War II single-player game. As the years would go by, plenty of other games and series would come out that tried to emulate the gameplay that was captured within Medal of Honor, but to be honest with you, in my opinion, no other game really quite hit the mark like this one did. This is precisely why Medal of Honor brings back very fond memories and also very concisely remembered ones, very distinct ways that we remember Medal of Honor because it was a front runner. There was nothing else like it at the time or even anything remotely similar to compare it to, so it really truly was something special. The atmosphere and environment Medal of Honor games were able to capture in a weird way just felt real. Even playing the game in 2020, you can tell that based on the level design, it was meant to feel as authentic as it possibly could be. Of course, the game is going to be some degree streamlined and there are boundaries to what you can do. Sometimes in these objectives, it is you doing the heroic thing, but not always. Sometimes you are just simply a piece in that puzzle, but that ends up making you feel even more like that relatable soldier that this is able to capture so well. You aren't always Superman. You're not just this one-man army that can do all of the objectives alone. You have to rely on your teammates quite a bit, and that really helps to provide that sense of unity along with your fellow soldiers. A nice touch that Medal of Honor gave to the men fighting beside you is they're not always overconfident and know exactly what they're doing. Most of the time, they're just as scared and terrified as you are. Having these conversations amongst yourself on the battlefield and getting people out of their head was a great part of the immersion in this game. The character development, as far as I remember, was very simple yet concise. They never bothered to set up like one big mustache twirling villain that you would, have a final showdown with at the end. It was kind of just you go from place to place doing your objective, like what a soldier does, following your orders. The question then becomes, would a game as simplistic yet effective as this survive in the current gaming landscape that is 2020? Honestly, it's hard to say. Now, I've actually not played the most recent Medal of Honor game, but I can imagine a lot of the older ones are still what people hold near and dear. Unfortunately, I think the era of games that are designed in this way that Medal of Honor so graciously captured is over, and you can think of that as a good or bad thing. Of course, as time has went on, games have just simply gotten more complex and are going to continue to get more advanced and complex as more time passes. But one thing I certainly think Medal of Honor did impeccably was show off the future of gaming that was to come. It was slightly ahead of its time and would basically set the trend of all of the games that were to precede it. Most importantly, the Medal of Honor series was able to encapsulate the fun factor, which is more than a lot of games can say. Many, especially FPS titles, get so caught up in making amazingly rendered graphic cutscenes and CGI that is beyond comprehension, but that's not what makes a video game fun precisely, and I think some games overshoot their step in trying to capture something that isn't really there. Medal of Honor succeeds because it focuses on the fun and being simplistic yet well-rounded. The special special effects and the over-the-top moments are kept to a minimum, and this helps the player feel way more immersed in the story and in the world, and even relate to their character much better. When the topic comes up of games that have stood the test of time, Medal of Honor needs to be in the discussion. Not only did it do an amazing job of being the game it was, but it also was to set the trend of making some of the games in the future that we would play years later and not even realize the influence that this game had on our favorite game. There will never be another game like Medal of Honor, something that was truly unique for the time and only in that particular moment in the world. Some of my favorite early gaming memories came from this video game, either playing it with my friend or my uncle or whoever, just being the predecessor to me absolutely falling in love with the FPS genre and really being indoctrinated into it for the rest of my life. Medal of Honor was the start of that, and I think we need to give credit where credit's due, but that is my take on why I think Medal of Honor was such a great game. Let me know down below in the comment section if you've ever played Medal of Honor, and if so, which was your favorite one? I would love to know your thoughts on that down below. But I hope you guys did end up enjoying today's video, and if you did, please give the video a like rating. That would be incredible. And honestly, I think I might do maybe more of these in the future if you guys enjoy it enough. So be sure to drop a thumbs up if you would like to see more stuff like this. Subscribe to the channel if you are brand new, and also if you guys want to, you can follow me over on Twitch where my live streams are going to be. Link is in the description. But I hope you guys enjoyed today's video. Take it easy, everyone. I gotta go. Have a good rest of your day, and peace out.